Hello and welcome to A Gentle Healing Journey. My name is Rain Francis, and on this channel I talk about how to deal with life's struggles and challenges. This is my second video in a series that I'm doing about why we stay in emotionally abusive relationships. Now, I can speak from experience as well as from an educational point of view on this subject. In today's video, I will discuss the phases of the cycle of abuse. I'm going to start by defining the cycle of abuse. This is a theory that was created by a psychologist named Lenore Walker in the 1970s. She came up with this theory to shed light on intimate partner violence. Generally speaking, in an abusive, intimate partner relationship, the cycle of abuse does follow the pattern of the theory, but it's important to note that the cycle of abuse may not necessarily follow the four phases or stages in order. It's not linear. One stage could last a long time, another stage could be completely skipped, or they can happen willy-nilly, not in order, But I think that by understanding and educating yourself on the cycle of abuse is one of the first steps in understanding what you might be going through, so that you can maybe see things more clearly and realistically and make safe and healthy choices for yourself. So, what is the cycle of abuse? The cycle of abuse is a pattern of behavior that is exhibited by an abuser to control their victim through fear and manipulation. This is very similar to the definition of coercive control. This is a topic I spoke about in last week's video, but the cycle of abuse is pretty textbook and it has four phases. The first phase is tension building. Now, during the tension building stage, the relationship is doing okay, pretty well. You're not really arguing that much. You're spending time together. You're having laughs. Everything seems to be going well. But at some point, you start to notice your partner is showing signs of stress. Tension starts to build between the two of you in the relationship. Your partner's behavior starts to become abusive. You know you didn't do anything wrong, so you figure it must be something going on in their lives. Maybe some problems at work, or maybe some financial difficulties. Maybe they're not feeling well, they're feeling sick. They don't seem to want to talk about it, so you just don't ask. You brush it off and overlook those red flags. And as time goes by, your partner's abusive behavior, it becomes more intense and it happens more frequently. Your partner is increasingly irritable, critical, and distant. There are emotional outbursts. Your partner shows impatience with you. They have a short temper, and they seem to be always flying off the handle more often. Some other behaviors that are quite common during the tension building phase are the silent treatment, where the abuser ignores you or refuses to talk to you. There's overreaction, getting angry over what seems to be small things. Blaming. The abuser will blame you for causing them stress or causing their problems. Jealousy could rear its ugly head during this phase as well. And at this point, the abuser becomes more critical. You could kind of use the metaphor that during this phase of abuse, the storm is brewing. You often feel like you have to tippy-toe around them to keep the peace, and you want to avoid conflict. You feel more anxious, which kind of adds to the tension in the relationship. I read something very interesting in my studies that I want to share with you here with regards to the tension building stage of the cycle of abuse. And here it is. As the world outside starts to feel more out of control, the abusive person may start to turn to the relationship and abuse their partner as a way of feeling in control again. Now, I really thought about this sentence when I read it because it makes perfect sense. Abuse is about control. It's not about the victim. If you think about this sentence, we can break it down to a person who is having problems outside of the relationship. They can't control anything about those problems, but they know they can control their partner. So they start the cycle of abuse to make them feel more in control and to make them feel better about themselves, to release the intolerable distress that they are feeling at having no control over anything going on outside of them. Now, when I think of my former relationship, I can see clearly an example of when the tension building stage often began. My late husband was a musician, and he tried to have his music published with various record labels. He would send out dozens, if not hundreds, of emails every few months. And I think we can agree that the music industry is a tough industry to break into. It's very, very competitive. Most of the time, he wouldn't even get any reply, and this really upset him. He would often say, nobody's getting back to me, nobody's ever going to get back to me, my music sucks, things like that. And those were usually the times when the tension started building in our relationship. You know, at first I was empathetic and I tried to respond, you're great, just give it some time. But he wouldn't listen, and it would eventually get him more angry. And he would kind of use that as a springboard to blame me for something. And like I mentioned in the description before, I figured, oh, well, he's just upset about the record labels. It has nothing to do with me. So I'm just going to let that go. But the problem with doing that in my particular situation was that he continued to show signs of abusing me, and it escalated throughout this stage. Have you ever been in a room with someone who's in a really bad mood? You can totally feel their bad mood, right? So during this tension building stage, I always felt his bad mood, his irritability, his hatred, and his anger. And in return, I'm sure he felt my fear and my anxiety. So this set the stage for the next phase, which is the incident of abuse. The tension finally explodes. The storm was brewing, and now it's right on top of you. During this phase of the abuse cycle, the abusive partner tries to openly gain a sense of power and control over their victim. The behavior is harmful, and it can be quite violent at times, and it's not something that is really easily avoided by the person on the receiving end, because a lot of the times it's done behind closed doors. During this stage, there could be a mix of many different types of abuse. And just a note, in next week's video, I'm going to talk about the many types of abuse that victims suffer when they are in intimate partner relationships. Now, an abusive incident may vary from cycle to cycle, and it might look different from one person's relationship to another. And the abuse is often unpredictable and really explosive. I remember when I first started to open up to friends about the emotional abuse in the relationship, I would often use words like blindsided, taken aback, shocked, surprised. And I remember even saying, I have no idea where that came from. He's acting like Jekyll and Hyde. But in hindsight, it wasn't necessarily always a case of Jekyll and Hyde. It was just that I was making excuses for his bad behavior. I refused to believe that it was going to happen again. During the tension building phase, I always figured, well, I didn't do anything wrong, so why would he take anything out on me? And this is what we do. It's unfortunate, but it is quite textbook. And I can attest that during this phase of abuse, the timing, not the abuse itself, was unpredictable. And by that I mean, it just seemed to come out of nowhere. We would be having a good day, maybe preparing dinner together, joking around, and then suddenly he would explode about something. And that's why it was so shocking to me, because it always seemed to come out of nowhere during a time when everything seemed fine. And I think what also shocked me the most was the level of rage that he displayed. And this is where I felt the most fear during this phase of the abuse cycle. And, during the incident of abuse phase, the abuser can start name calling, shaming you, blaming you for all their problems that they've ever had in their lives or in the relationship. There could be throwing of objects, breaking dishes, punching walls. There are a lot of coercive control tactics used during this phase. And I spoke about coercive control in detail in the first video of this series, and I'm going to link that above in the cards and also below in the description if you want to watch that. They may threaten to harm you, your children, or your beloved pets. They may try to control what you're wearing or what you're watching or how much you use your phone. The silent treatment could get more lengthy. Gaslighting gets worse. They may try to intimidate you by staring you down. This could be a time when the abuser decides to bring up something that you told them in confidence and use it against you and throw it back in your face. They may try to target your insecurities. They may try to humiliate you. They may refuse to contribute to the finances or to the household duties or just abandon the relationship altogether. If you had plans, suddenly they're not showing up. In cases of physical abuse, there could be physical or sexual violence. Or the abuser might just up and leave the house for a week and not communicate with you at all, abandoning you, just walking away. And during this phase for me, the weapon of choice was verbal and emotional abuse. I was sworn at, insulted, called names, made fun of, blamed for things I didn't do, interrogated, questioned constantly. And if I would stand up for myself, I was told that I was a bad person and that I was wrong about everything and I was the aggressor. Everything was my fault. And then he would just walk away from me, slam the door behind him, lock it or barricade it, and not speak to me until I came to him to apologize. And when this happened in our relationship, I couldn't tolerate it. It blindsided me to the point where I was thoroughly confused. So I would follow him around and fish for information while he was either completely ignoring me or while he was throwing me some little breadcrumbs. Eventually it got to the point where I was so discombobulated and emotionally drained and hurt that I just couldn't take it anymore. And I apologized blindly for everything and anything. This usually didn't work, meaning he would continue the silent treatment. I remember feeling so alone and abandoned during this time because there was so much hostility in the house. He would walk right by me and ignore me completely. To be ostracized and treated like you don't exist, not even to be acknowledged by the person who claims to love you and who you love. I personally think this is the worst type of abuse out there. And I know that other people would disagree based on their own experiences. But for me, the silent treatment, that was the most damaging. I remember feeling so overwhelmed, so distressed and frightened, so trapped and so helpless. I didn't want anyone to know. So I kept it all to myself. And that made the distress intolerable. I used to have anxiety disorder and panic attacks when I was much younger. And for decades, I did so much work on myself to manage the anxiety and my stress levels so that it would never escalate into panic attacks. And I was successful. But during my marriage, that anxiety and those panic attacks came back. And for those of you who suffer from panic and anxiety, oh my gosh, I feel for you. When you're having a panic attack, you feel like you would do just about anything for it to go away. It's a feeling of terror. You sometimes feel like you're just going to die. And this is how it felt when he chronically gave me silent treatments and when he chronically acted like I didn't exist. And that's why I always chased him, to make myself feel better. That's why I always took all the blame, so that he would stop treating me badly, at least for a little while. It was like I almost needed that relief in order to feel better. So I was willing to just go along with whatever he said, no matter how wrong that was. But you know, there was something that I noticed as the years went by. As I grew stronger and more confident, and as I started to open up to therapists, social workers, helplines, and good friends, when he walked away from me and when he gave me the silent treatment, I stopped chasing. As I started to speak to more trusted people about what was going on with me and in the relationship, and as I started to educate myself on emotional abuse and coercive control, I was able to do a lot of self-therapy. I was able to start rebuilding my confidence, finding my courage, and I was able to resist that need to make myself feel better by humiliating myself and taking full blame for his abusive behavior. It was just a horrible cat and mouse game, and I put a stop to it. When I stopped chasing him, he would eventually come around to see me and actually throw more verbal abuse my way, and then walk away again, slam the door, and give me the silent treatment. I stopped taking the bait during the last years because I didn't care anymore. I mean, let's be honest, of course I cared to a point because it was hurting me. But I was stronger, and I was able not to react. And usually when that second attempt didn't work to break me down, and he noticed that I was going about my life regardless, he would come to see me and say, "Can we talk?" And these talks could go two ways. Either he would continue the emotional and verbal abuse, but in a more passive-aggressive way. And by that I mean he would continue, the abuse, but he would be talking more softly and portraying me as the aggressor and he as the victim. And then there were times when he would listen to me, feel bad, and listen to me reestablish my boundaries. And by reestablishing my boundaries, it was just me telling him that when he treated me badly, I was not going to react anymore. I was not going to respond. I wasn't going to chase him. I was just going to go about my life and move on. And I was very clear that I wasn't going to tolerate this type of behavior for the long term. So as I became stronger and more confident, as I set and kept my boundaries and was very clear about my intentions, the next phase of the cycle began, and this phase was reconciliation. During this phase, the apologies began. The storm was brewing during tension building. The storm exploded on you during the incident of abuse phase. And now during reconciliation, the storm is easing. The abuser will try to win back your love and your trust. They'll try to restore the relationship. During the first two stages, the abuser was able to take out all of their pent-up stress and issues on you, and they feel relieved now. So they want to restore the relationship back to the honeymoon phase, the lovey-dovey phase, the affectionate phase. So what happens? Lots of apologies, lots of gifts and affection, lots of promises to change. You may hear things like, "I will never do that again. Oh gosh, I don't deserve you. Please forgive me. I promise I'll get help. I want to be together forever. I hate that I did this to you. I hate this about myself. I love you and you're my soulmate. This is love bombing. Love bombing means that you are inundated with loving affection and loving acts. And this is exactly what you kind of need after having gone through abuse, right? The person who hurt you the most can be the person who makes you feel the best. All you want is for them to stop hurting you and to start loving you and treating you well again. And during this reconciliation phase, this is what happens. When you have this much love and affection kind of thrown at you, so to speak, you release a lot of oxytocin. That's the hormone that can make you feel safe and comforted and loved and warm. It's very confusing in an abusive cycle because you feel close to that person who just abused you because of the hormone release. And this is what creates what's called a trauma bond. This is where you feel so emotionally connected to your abuser, despite all of the harm that they caused you. And I'm going to talk more about trauma bond in detail in one of the videos of this series on why we stay. The more bonded you are through the trauma of abuse, the more difficult it is to walk away from the abuser. It's really confusing because it offers you hope that things are going to change. I have a video called The Disease of Hope, and I've added that to the playlist of why we stay because it is one of the reasons why I stayed for so long. I had the disease of hope. And this disease of hope, it was caused by the cycle of abuse. The abuser, they may genuinely feel shame for their behavior in the moment. In the moment where that oxytocin is being released, they may truthfully feel like crap because of the way they treated you. When they apologize, they mean it in the moment. When they make promises to change, they mean it at that time. And it does seem genuine, and it probably is. So you're inclined to believe them in the moment and give them another chance because you care about them and you love them and you want to be in a relationship with them. But it never lasts. It's short-lived. The reconciliation phase of the cycle of abuse, in my case, that was exactly as I described it. Most of the gifts that I received were gifted to me during this phase. Most of the outings and the visits to the restaurants and the treats happened during this phase. Most of the affectionate and intimate moments that we had together, they all happened during this phase as well. The love bombing really worked on me very well. And I'm not saying that he was conniving, because I know that when he apologized, I could tell that he truly felt shame for his behavior. But as I mentioned, it's always short-lived. He wanted to make me feel happy because he knew that he made me feel awful and he needed to relieve himself. It was during this reconciliation phase where he would make calls to the therapists, where we would make plans for our future together. We would even walk the dogs together, which was extremely rare. It was a huge deal because he never wanted to leave the house. As confusing as all of that was, I always had hope that things would get better. So what follows the reconciliation phase is the fourth phase, which is calm. During this phase of calm, things seem to be so much better. There's a sense of peace. There's harmony in the home. The relationship feels more stable. Hope for the future is restored, and you truly believe that they will follow through on those promises that they made to you. You feel reassured. You feel hopeful. You feel like that part of your partner, they're gone now. That's not going to happen again because they're continuing to show you lots of affection. And they seem to really be following through on whatever promise they made to you. They may continue to apologize. They may put you up on a pedestal. I have to say that I felt like a queen on her throne at the beginning of the calm phase. It really felt like he respected, loved, and admired me. But as time goes by, you start to notice that things that get your spidey senses tingling, right? You start to notice that they're transitioning from apologies and remorse to excuse making. The abuser will casually say something like, well, I feel bad for yelling at you and calling you those names and maybe hitting you, but I was under so much stress and you were being a little bit difficult. If you bring up the incident of abuse, you may be told, you're exaggerating. That wasn't as bad as you're remembering. That's not how it happened. That's the gaslighting that begins. You may be told it takes two to tango. If you bring up the incident of abuse, you may also be told, it's over with. Why are you bringing this up again? Just get over it. But the problem is that the issues that caused the abuse in the first place are never addressed. And unfortunately, this sets up the stage for the cycle to begin all over again. I mentioned gaslighting just before. For those of you who don't know, this is when somebody makes you question your own reality. If you've just been through an incident of abuse and you remember how explosive and unpredictable it was and how very hurtful it was, and then you're being told, well, it wasn't that big of a deal, you should just get over it. This is gaslighting. It causes you to become confused and doubt yourself. You wonder if maybe you did overreact. Maybe it wasn't that big of a deal and you're remembering it wrong. Maybe I should just get over it. Your partner seemed to want to make up for what they did, but now they're making excuses and telling you that it wasn't that big a deal. They're dismissing their behavior, and it makes you feel apprehensive and very untrusting. I remember being told that we were both to blame for the argument. And this was a huge dismissal because it wasn't a simple argument. It was far worse. And though, of course, I will agree that I was, the cause of arguments in our relationship throughout the 12 years, of course. But I didn't want to be blamed for his abusive behavior. He would stop apologizing and start blame shifting. This was another reason why the cycle would restart at times, because at times I stood up for myself and I questioned him as to why he thought I was to blame when he called me names, when he swore at me, when he gave me silent treatments. Why would the blame fall on me for his behavior? He rarely received that well, and then the cycle began. The tension building would start all over again. Now, as a disclaimer, I always say this. He was not like this all of the time. I'm not here to try to make him look like a monster. I'm making these videos as a tool for healing and as a tool for awareness. I want to help people who are going through this. And I also want other people to understand what these victims of abuse go through so that they know how to help them and support them. So many people don't understand. And they say things that which, innocently enough, as they may seem, makes the abused person feel that much worse and that much more isolated. A very long time ago, I opened up to a friend, but with very little details about what was happening during the relationship. This was the first time I opened up. This was before I called helplines, and this person replied to my email with 2 words: dump him. I'd already been with him for 7 years at this point. We shared a house rental together. We shared 6 pets together. We were entangled financially and emotionally. Dump him? I simply didn't understand that response, so I didn't respond to it. We're not friends anymore because this person could not get off the dump him train. Have you dumped him yet? When are you going to dump him? Kick him to the curb. It's not as easy as that. My late husband, he was a fun person a lot of the times. He was very loving and affectionate. He was talented and smart, and he was very generous. And that's why I say it wasn't 24/7. We stayed actually in the phase of reconciliation for months and sometimes years at a time. And then something would happen and the cycle would restart. During the last 5 years, before he took his life in 2025, the cycle happened quite regularly, I'd say on a monthly basis. But during the last 3 months or so, when he was alive, I would say on a weekly to bi-weekly basis. And sometimes reconciliation and calm would never even happen. And I would kind of be locked in a cycle of tension building and incident of abuse. And I know how much it damaged me. I know this is, as my channel says, a gentle healing journey, and it's for life. I guess the question remains, how do you get yourself out? I'm a little hesitant to talk about that subject because every case is different. In some relationships, it's just far too dangerous to get out. You aren't safe. You need professional help. There have been incidences where people leave their abusers start to stalk them, and then they kill them. It's terrifying, it's dangerous, and it's a tricky situation to be in an abusive relationship, especially when you're trying to get out of it. You know, as controversial as this sounds, the truth of the matter is my late husband kind of did me a favor by taking his life, because he told me over and over that he was never going to leave me. He also told me how enraged he would be if he knew that I was with somebody else. He told me he wouldn't be able to live if I was with somebody else. And he also said that it would take the police dragging him out of the house in handcuffs, kicking and screaming before he ever left me. It was really scary. And when I told him these things were frightening me, he said, "Oh, why are you playing the abused wife?" He would downplay that and say that I was overreacting. But I really did feel scared when he said things like this. I think that fear influenced me to stay longer in the relationship than I should have. And because he took his life, now I have my life and my freedom to heal and to move on. So I'm grateful for everything that happened to me, like I said, as controversial as that sounds. And I think the topic of how to get out of an abusive relationship is just too subjective. It depends on the person. It depends on your situation. It depends on your support system. I would say that the first step is to talk about it in a safe environment. It doesn't have to be a paid therapist. It could be an anonymous helpline. I started talking to counselors on distress lines, suicide helplines, domestic violence hotlines. I remember one time I called in a domestic abuse hotline, and it was based in Houston, Texas, in the United States. And I live in Canada. And the woman on the other end of the phone said, "Well, we usually reserve this for Americans." But she still talked to me anyway for about an hour. Just being able to talk about what was happening to me truthfully and anonymously set me on the path of strength that I needed to walk away from this situation. If my late husband had not taken his life in May of 2025, he was supposed to move out. He promised that he would be gone by June 1st, 2025, and we agreed to him moving out because this is my house, and I made it very clear to him that if he didn't leave, as agreed upon, I would do everything in my power to hire a family lawyer to have him removed, because the abuse was getting worse. And I made it very clear that I was hoping that we could do this in a civil way. And if we take some time apart, do some therapy on our own, that maybe we could try to reconcile into a more healthy and respectful relationship this time around. I meant that. So I was definitely on my way to ending the abuse cycle, no matter what it took. It took me 12 years. to find my courage. Everyone's method will be different. If you ask me for my advice, my personal advice, based on my own experience, I would say break the silence. Break the silence and educate yourself on what's happening to you. And then go from there. Move on in a safe way, however way you feel is right for you and safe for you. Some people will stay in these relationships because they can't leave. They don't have money for a lawyer. They have kids together. They're being threatened. They don't have income. They love their partner. They own a house together or a business together. Or they're just not ready to work on the trauma bond at this time in their lives. So friends, another difficult topic, right? The cycle of abuse. I really hope that by sharing this video with you today, you were able to have a better understanding of what an abused person goes through, a lot of the times behind closed doors. And as always, if ever you'd like to send me a message or ask me to discuss a topic, feel free to leave comments under the videos, or please go check out my channel description. In the channel description, you'll find my email address, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. Be safe and be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.